All right, I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for showing up and being prompt and more on time than us members of Congress. So glad to have you all with us. I looked at all your backgrounds and resumes, and it's going to be a great panel. And so I'm looking forward to discussing the issue and having a great conversation. And so with that, I'll call this hearing to order and get us started. Thank you all for being here. Today, the labor market is facing significant challenges. The labor force participation rate is at 40-year lows. Welcome, Chairman. At levels not seen since the Jimmy Carter era. Many are calling for the federal government to allow mass immigration of foreign workers. However, displacing American workers is counterproductive and misses the point. The problem is much deeper and more fundamental. Our K-12 education system fares poorly in some respects compared to other industrialized countries. I taught Econ 101 for 20 years in Virginia. Kids are coming out of high school not knowing what a business is. They don't know what an entrepreneur is. They don't know a price from a profit from a cost. And we have to change that. That's adding to the skills mismatch that I think we're all probably going to be discussing today. We also have a vast welfare state that disincentivizes individuals to work. Taxes remain high and complex. I think people are currently eligible for about $50,000 in just federal welfare benefits. Combine that with state and local. If you've got 2 kids in school, that's 26 grand. If you work under the table, that's 25 grand. Add all that together, you're doing $100,000 worth of benefit to you and your family, and it's hard for the labor market to compete with that at $10 an hour. So you see, it's kind of a triple bank shot. And then some people want to use immigration to solve those complexities, right? And so I always start off we've always been a country of immigrants. We welcome all immigrants, most of the immigrants that come in south of the border. Predominantly Catholic, fine people. That's not the debate at all. The issue coming in is people make about 20 grand. Pay some income taxes, a little bit of federal income tax, FICA. If you got 2 kids in school, it's 26 grand and you're upside down. And so we've got labor market problems we've got to solve, K-12 skills mismatch, welfare system issues. It's tied to immigration. That's in the news. Many businesses are struggling to find and hire qualified employees. That's true, I think, across the country in every district. Last month, I heard this in person when I traveled around my district, met with dozens of business leaders. They told me all too often they cannot find a qualified, skilled workforce to fill job vacancies, and this hinders their ability to grow their business. And that's why we've been growing at about 1 to 2 instead of 2 to 3, and if you get tax cuts, maybe shooting for 4. In just the past year, the number of job vacancies grew from 5.5 to 6.2 million, right? Job vacancies, 6 million. Which is the highest in this century. Although large businesses may have the resources to staff recruiting departments and offer better wages and benefits, resource-strapped small businesses are left at a significant disadvantage, and that's our job in this committee, is to pay attention to small business. For example, according to a recent survey by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, NFIB, 87% of small businesses looking to hire workers reported few to no qualified applicants. Next to tax and regulatory burdens, finding qualified workers has become one of the top concerns for small business owners, if not the top. This morning, we will hear from a distinguished panel of witnesses who will give their perspective on small business labor market issues and hopefully solutions. We'll dive deeper into how the labor market affects economic growth, how we can help Americans acquire in-demand skills, and how to get disenfranchised workers participating in the labor market. I appreciate the witnesses being here today. I look forward to your testimony. I now yield to the ranking member, my good friend, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. America's economy has improved since the economic downturn 8 years ago, and most signs of economic gain are promising. Yet a significant labor market challenges still exist for small business owners. Even though the United States has experienced lower unemployment, small employers widely report difficult finding qualified and skilled workers. The gap between the employer needs and worker skills, the imperative to close it, has been recognized as an important challenge by many business leaders, educators, and policymakers. However, the solutions are not simple. This gap between the employer needs and the worker skills, known as the skill gap, is a particular challenge for small firms. They face greater barriers to developing a skilled workforce than their larger counterparts, including fewer financial resources to assist in hiring, retraining, and developing advanced skills. For businesses, this reality has dire consequences. Unfilled positions mean they cannot take on more customers and risk losing businesses to competitors who can fill those positions. The manufacturing and the construction sector in particular facing challenging obstacles due to this deficiency. If we are able to meet the demands for trained workers, our country will not be able to compete globally. This troubling trend lacks the attention it deserves, and small businesses deserve a better deal. Part of that plan requires targeted post-secondary education, such as skill certificate systems, which can help small firms secure qualified employees to help them grow. Novel partnerships among industry, educators, and policymakers also playing a role by preparing the workforce, incentivizing school completion. Such direct career paths between students and employers are vital. Too many American workers and small businesses have been left behind. That's why creating incentives for training, certification, and apprenticeship programs lead to a better America. We should leverage the tools available to us in order to help small businesses owners thrive with a stronger workforce. Today's hearing offers us the opportunity to discuss the challenges and solutions to help our nation's job creators prosper. Prudent investments in training, education will also lead to higher consumer confidence and demand. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and how we can ensure America's small businesses are prepared to move our economy forward. I look forward to hearing and thanking the witnesses for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask they be submitted for the record. I'd like to take a moment to explain the timing lights for you. You will each have 5 minutes to deliver your testimony. The light will start out green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. Finally, at the end of your 5 minutes, it will turn red. I ask you try to adhere somewhat to that time limit. We're going to probably run an informal shop here today and just have a nice conversation. But if your opening remarks can stay in that ballpark, that would be great. Our first witness is Dr. Michael Farron, a research fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Dr. Farron's research focuses include labor and economic development issues. He received his bachelor's, master's, and doctorate from The Ohio State University. I'm from Michigan, footnote. Thank you for being here this morning, and you're recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Barrett, Ranking Member Evans, and thank you for allowing a Buckeye to address you today. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the skills gap with you, and what I would like, if possible, for you to take away from my presentation today is the economic perspective in addressing social problems, in that the best way to address social problems from an economic perspective is to either reduce the cost of the social problem or the social value, or to increase the cost of the social problem. So in the case of training, if we have a skills gap in job applicants applying to businesses, then what we should do is reduce the cost or find ways to reduce the cost of acquiring new skills. What this does is it allows for a bottom-up approach for individual people to figure out the exact way to solve the individual problems facing them and the individual problems facing businesses, rather than a targeted, mandated approach that says, okay, I think we need specifically more science and math, so we're going to fund more science and math in particular. But businesses know what they need better than we here in Washington, so we should give them the ability to figure out what that is particularly. So along these lines, I have two policy proposals that might help address the skills gap problem. The first is to reform the tax code, and that is to allow for tax deductions in training investments to be counted exactly the same way that tax deductions for factory investments or machinery investments are done. So I'm saying that to treat human capital investments the same way that we treat physical capital investments. Currently, businesses can take a tax deduction on improvements in machinery or tools or additional training for workers in their current job. However, they can't take tax deductions specifically to train workers into a brand new job. And so that removing that will lower the cost of training someone exactly into the exact job that the company needs, and as a result should go a long way to actually addressing the skills gap, because companies won't have to wait for the exact right worker to come along. They can find a high-quality applicant and then train them directly into that position. It also makes training investments less risky for workers, because you're never quite certain if you're going to get a job when you engage in training prior to the fact. But if you already have a job and the workplace, the company is training you exactly in the way that you need to be trained for the job, you're pretty certain that your training is going to be valuable to the company. Secondly, something that I think is a good idea is to take a new look at disability aid programs and potentially redesign them. The important thing that we should do is to keep their valuable safety net for people who are unable to work, but look at whether they may be causing unintended consequences and inspiring people to stay out of the labor market longer than they otherwise would. So recent research by Scott Winship with the Mercatus Center and my own research going forward looks at this and finds that the level of inactivity in the labor market has increased over time. So that is the number of people not working and who are not even looking for work. In particular, over the last 50 years, the rate of inactivity in prime age men between the age of 25 and 54, people who you would expect to be working, has more than tripled. Today, we have over 7 million men who are not working and not even looking for work. And the major part of this increase has come because of men saying that they are disabled and physically unable to work, which is surprising given that the health of the general society and the number of workplace injuries has declined over time. So to the extent that programs are not giving people an incentive to rejoin the labor force after they've healed and they could potentially, is a problem, might be part of the skills gap problem. And importantly, a lot of these workers are in the later half of their career. And so they have built up skills and experience that they could be teaching to younger workers. So if we address the problem this way, we might be able to address the future skills gap problem at the same time. So in conclusion, I would advise hopefully a economic approach to solving problems, looking at the costs of the problem, but also addressing the potential mismatch of the allowing for training programs to be treated the same way as physical capital investments in factory machinery and redesigning disability aid programs. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Farron. Appreciate the testimony. I remember after the financial crisis, the inactivity piece, Greenspan and Bernanke were asked, what do you think the greatest harm from the financial crisis was? And they didn't say the trillions lost in equity. They said loss of skills.
Yes.
Right? Get folks being out of the labor market for a while, and then re-entry is going to be a problem. And so your testimony is right on the mark. Our next witness is Bruce Seelhammer, Electrical Construction Group Manager at SECCO, Inc. in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. This morning, Mr. Seelhammer will be testifying on behalf of the independent electrical contractors. At SECCO, Mr. Seelhammer oversees electrical construction projects for the company. He's also a preparation instructor for the Master Electrician's exam. Thank you for being here this morning to share your perspective on skills, workforce training, and you may begin your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Bratt and Ranking Member Evans and the members of the subcommittee. I'm honored for the opportunity to testify before you today at this important hearing. And as you said, my name is Bruce Seelhammer. I'm the Electrical Construction Group Manager for SECCO in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And I am here in behalf of the IEC, the Independent Electrical Contractors, which I'm currently serving as the national president, and I'm also here on behalf of our chapter in Pennsylvania. Based in Alexandria, our IEC association has over 50 affiliates, training centers, representing over 2,300 electrical and systems contractors nationwide, and our membership consists primarily of small businesses, with the average contractors having around 30 employees, 20 of which are typically the electricians in the field. And our purpose really is to establish a competitive environment for the merit shop, a philosophy that promotes free enterprise, open competition, and economic opportunity. And before getting into the workforce challenges faced by the industry, I thought I'd give you a little bit of my background. I am currently a licensed master electrician, and I'm also a veteran of the United States Air Force. And I give credit to the Air Force's electrical apprentice program for the skills that have contributed to my successful career that I have today. I've been with my current company, SECO, for 24 years, and I've risen up through the ranks and become part of the senior team, where I oversee about 40 of our 90 employees in the construction management position. And for decades, IEC has been on the forefront of providing highly trained electricians in the industry, and we're known for our registered apprentice program. And it's an earn while they learn, and they incur little to no debt, and then enter into a job at a median salary of almost $53,000. And again, the IEC's apprentice program is certified by the Department of Labor, the Office of Apprenticeship, and state apprenticeship councils. And in addition, the American Council on Education has recommended our students that graduate from IEC are eligible for 40 semester hours, 40 credit hours for college credits. And so collectively, IEC will train over 10,000 electrical apprentices in 2017. As you're probably aware, electrical contractors, like the rest of the construction industry, continue to struggle to find qualified candidates to fill openings. According to recent research from the Associated General Contractors, among the trades, electrician was the second hardest position for their members to fill. And this challenge is expected to continue. And for the coming years, estimating there will be about a 14% increase demand for electricians through 2024. Construction employers as a whole are experiencing trouble hiring new workers, with an estimated 500,000 skilled construction jobs currently vacant. And a number of those different factors have contributed to the workforce shortages. One of those is what we talked about, is a lot of the folks have in fact left during the recession. In addition, much of the skilled workforce is planning to retire in about the next 10 years. 3 million of the current 14.5 million construction workers are looking to retire and leave the industry. And I think the average age right now of the construction workers is 54. That's a high average, right? So unfortunately, our industry can't keep up with the demand. The cultural shift in our country over the past few decades has definitely had an impact on this. A significant emphasis has been placed on young people to attend a traditional four-year university, and a career in the trades is rarely discussed as an option. And parents have grown to believe that the primary pathway to a successful career in the American dream is through a traditional college education. Not helping matters is that many jurisdictions judge the success of their high schools on the number of students that attend college. So these guidance counselors and school officials have less incentive to suggest students consider entering an apprentice program like the IEC has to offer. This, along with enormous subsidies by the government in the form of student loans, has made it easier for students to pay for college without fully understanding the massive debt they're incurring and no guarantee of a job that is going to pay off. Another factor contributing to the construction industry worker shortage is the lack of exposure of young people to skilled trades early as a viable career path. Across the country, we're seeing less investment in vocational or career technical education, CTE programs in high schools. These programs offer students the opportunity to work with their hands early on. And every day, the IEC chapters and contractor members aggressively search for people interested in entering our apprentice program. I can tell you at my company, we work with local high school VOTEC programs and promote the opportunities that come with being an electrician. I personally sit on both of the occupational advisory committees for both of our VOTECs locally, and we were able to hire those folks and bring them on board. I know I'm running out of time, but to really address some of the labor shortages in the short term, some of the things that we'll do as IEC members is we will share labor back and forth with our competitors and those kind of things, and bring on temporary help. And there's a lot to do And since all of the trades work together, typically have some impact on each other. So I can give you a prime example. We're on a project currently that's 2 months behind because the concrete guys didn't have enough help. And you can't put the rest of the building up without the foundation. And those are the things that we're constantly running into. So I won't drone on too long, but in closing, I just want to express our willingness to work with the subcommittee in Congress and the ability to find practical solutions to address the workforce shortage. So I thank you for the opportunity today. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seelheimer. We appreciate your testimony, and I have a couple questions that you provoked some interesting issues for us. Our third witness is Carlos Castro, president of Todos. Do I got that right? Todos, Inc. in Woodbridge, Virginia. Thank you for being with us. This morning, Mr. Castro will be testifying on behalf of the National Grocers Association. Founded in 1990, Todos Supermarket now has 2 locations in Virginia, which employ roughly 170 people. Thank you for being here this morning, and you may begin your testimony. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Brad, Ranking Member Evans, and member of the subcommittee. My name is Carlos Castro, and I am the owner of the supermarket located in Woodbridge, Virginia. I have been asked to testify by the National Grocers Association on behalf of the independent supermarket community. The National Grocers Association in the National Trade Association representing the retailers and wholesalers that comprise the independent sector of the supermarket industry, including full-service supermarket such as Todos and multi-state regional chains. Todos Supermarket was created in 1990 and aims to fulfill the needs of an increasingly diverse community. To help better serve our customers, we have expanded our offerings beyond groceries and offer money services, money transfer services, notary, insurance, and tax preparation services. We even have a U.S. Post Office in-house. As the saying goes, good help is hard to find, but at Todos we have placed an added emphasis on youth hiring practices that allow us to train workers and create an inclusive culture that allows us to retain our employees for the long run. Our various offerings have also allowed us to attract a diverse array of talent and keep our employees in their toes as our business continues to expand and change. But costly regulations often take up too much of our time and resources and have served as a serious barrier to hiring. According to National Grocery Association survey data, the average grocer can expect to spend between $40,000 and $50,000 a year in regulatory compliance per store per year. In an industry with 1% to 2% profit margin, that is a significant amount of resources to be taken away from other improvements, additional staff, or expanded offerings. Affordable Care Act mandates on small, The Affordable Care Act mandate on small business serve as a perfect example of regulation with good intentions that have created an additional burden for our businesses. Todos Supermarket was committed to offering healthcare to employees before the healthcare law was implemented. We were not only proud that we could cover our employees with affordable healthcare, but it was a hiring incentive that improved both recruitment in an effort to retain hardworking employees. Now that all businesses of our size must offer healthcare plans under the ACA, we can no longer use our healthcare program to differentiate our company, and our expenses have gone through the roof. If Todos had not diversified our offerings, we would certainly have been forced to close our doors due to the increasing financial strains regulations have caused. Congress and the regulatory agency have taken steps recently to lighten the burden on small businesses like mine. The recent federal district court order overturning the Department of Labor overtime rule, as well as the decision by OMB not to implement the EE01 pay reporting regulation have been a step in the right direction. While there is no one single regulation dragging the heaviest on small businesses, the sheer volume of regulation that require our compliance is what's holding us back. Finally, with a workforce and customer base that is heavily comprised of Latino population, I feel compelled to address President Trump's decision to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA program. Immigrants that come here as children as part of families seeking a better life should not be punished for the decision of their parents. Some members of our team utilize the DACA program, and they are some of our some of our hardest workers. While I understand there is good argument on both sides as to whether DACA passes constitutional muster, it is clear that the fate of 800,000 young Latino is now on the hands of the legislature. I urge Congress to act swiftly to find a solution to this issue and to consider the potential harm that could come from failure to act, not only to our businesses, but communities and families as well. At Todos, we often say, if you have a positive attitude and work hard, there is no limit of how high you can rise. With businesses, it should be the same. I would ask our representatives to continue to look for opportunities to unshackle the businesses from the heavy regulatory burden and let businesses like mine see how high we can go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castro. I think your testimony shows how all these issues are interlinked, especially with the regulatory examples you gave. We appreciate your testimony. And now I'll yield to our ranking member for the introduction of our final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Garland Carrick. Mr. Carrick is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Manufacturing Institute, a research and policy institute in Washington. He leads the Institute research activities and the development of a national education data center to deliver outcome information on education program. He previously worked at the U.S. Department of Labor, where he worked to integrate the workforce development, economic development, and education strategies of a region to create a talent base for economic growth. He attended Carnegie Mellon University, which is in the great city of Pittsburgh. He received a degree in policy and management. Welcome.
Thank you. Chairman Bratt, Ranking Member Evans, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the workforce challenges facing our small manufacturers. As you said, my name is Gardner Carrick, and I'm the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the Manufacturing Institute. We are affiliated with the National Association of Manufacturers, which is the largest industrial trade association, and voice to over 12 million men and women that make things in America. So it's the mission of the Institute to attract, train, and develop the world-class talent that manufacturers need to compete in the global economy. There are over 250,000 manufacturing companies in the U.S. today, and over 90% of them have fewer than 100 employees. They provide good jobs in every city, town, and community in the country. And today, manufacturing is enjoying a renaissance in the U.S. Since the end of the last recession, manufacturing companies have added over 1 million jobs. And in this year alone, companies have added nearly 140,000 new jobs. Those are really good numbers for manufacturing in the last 25 years. While times are good for manufacturing in the U.S., there is a present and growing challenge for manufacturing companies. They are unable to find people with the skills for their open positions. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, there are nearly 400,000 open jobs in manufacturing. And a study done by Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute estimated that there could be as many as 2 million unfilled positions by 2025. So I thought I'd use the remainder of my time today to talk a little bit about what manufacturers are doing to try to address this problem. So in Tucson, Arizona, a group of 20 small manufacturers formed an organization called the Southern Arizona Manufacturing Partners. Working with the local high school district, Pima Community College, and the workforce system, they created a 20-month apprenticeship-style program. This innovative program has enabled small companies to aggregate their skill demands and hiring requirements, and several dozen students are now participating in the program. In another example, across 9 states and 20 community colleges, there's a manufacturing-led program called the Federation for Advanced Manufacturing Education. Originally started by Toyota in Kentucky, hundreds of small companies now participate in the 5-semester apprenticeship-style program, where students spend 3 days a week at work and 2 days a week in school learning the skills to be an advanced manufacturing technician. This is an excellent example of how larger companies support and partner with smaller companies to create the benefits for the entire industry. And Congressman Kelly, Itawamba Community College is one of those participants. So, there's also a long-term concern, though, and that is that the number of young people willing to consider and pursue a career in manufacturing. This has been a multi-decade challenge for manufacturers, and the Manufacturing Institute is supporting programs that help students experience today's manufacturing in hopes that they will pursue careers in the industry. 5 years ago, the Institute and NAM helped create a new nationwide showcase for our industry called Manufacturing Day. Companies would open their doors on the first Friday of October and invite the community in to see what manufacturing is really all about today. That showcase has now grown to nearly 3,000 events and over 500,000 participants last year. In Southern California, a small aerospace parts supplier called Ace Clearwater has made Manufacturing Day a really big deal for them. Last year, Ace had over 500 parents, teachers, and students participate. They brought out exhibits in 3D printing, virtual reality headsets, and welding simulations, and let the students really experience what state-of-the-art manufacturing is about. And finally, in Pennsylvania, there is a competition that pairs a team of 8th grade students with a local manufacturer where they interview employees and executives and film the operations of the plant. The students then create and narrate a video about what's so cool about manufacturing. The results in Lehigh Valley have really been stunning. This is where the program started. Last year, over 800 people attended an awards banquet where they gave awards to the best videos created. But most importantly, the manufacturing programs at the local technical high school have seen a 60% increase in enrollment since this program started 5 years ago. The video competition has now gone Commonwealth-wide, with 200 middle schools partnering with 200 manufacturing companies to create videos in 8 different competitions. It's a very, very interesting program to gain experience and interest in manufacturing for people just as they're starting to decide what career to pursue. So, Mr. Chairman, the manufacturing sector has struggled to find the right workers, and it's really impacting our ability to grow. But companies large and small are creating and participating in programs that will solve this challenge. Manufacturing Day is on October 6th this year. That's less than a month away. And I encourage all of you to try to attend an event that day and see what manufacturing is like in your district. So thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning on behalf of U.S. manufacturers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrick. We appreciate your testimony. And so I'll just lead off with a general question. This issue can get a little contentious because there's always two sides, right? On the one hand, you're giving me just example after example of $50,000 jobs which can't be filled, right? In great career vocations, whatever. You mentioned there's a cultural shift. And on the other hand, there's plenty of examples. People say, hey, here's this job offer, and people are lined up around the block, right? People can't find jobs, right? And so I taught college for a while, and I don't know, right, about the cultural shift piece or whatever. I'm still kind of a free market guy at heart, right? There's something going wrong. When you got $50,000 jobs that aren't getting filled, I just want you to all kind of, what would you do if you're in our spot? Is it a cultural piece? Is it a skills piece? The programs you mentioned are great. I applaud all the folks who are doing this. And in our K-12 system, we all do these little programs, but they're kind of Band-Aids instead of just a whole systemic change in K-12. Back when I went to K-12, the teachers, no matter what class you were in, if you're in English class, they'd tell you about writing a business memo or this kind of thing, right? But now everyone's just, the only metric that you're measured on is the SOL test score. And like you said, getting kids, the measurement is getting kids to college. I think Mr. Seelheimer mentioned that. And so if you were us, or if you could wave a wand to change the cultural component, I mean, what is the big solution that has to happen. I mean, and think big. I mean, President Trump, he's got a bully pulpit, right? He ran a show called The Apprentice, right? I've told his people, get out at that bully pulpit, right? And do the apprenticeship thing, right? I mean, this is huge. But what would you do if you had carte blanche? Where's the biggest issue you see if you all just want to kind of go quickly, starting with Dr. Farron and then just go right down the queue?
Thank you, Chairman Brett. I guess the way that I would look at it is kind of what you've already framed, the steering culture, and I think culture is a part of this because 50, 75 years ago, going out and getting a manufacturing job was the ideal. And so steering culture in new directions and updating people's information takes time. The ship doesn't turn on a dime. And so I think initiatives like what has been described here today to let people know that new manufacturing isn't simply working with grease and grime and dirt, but it's working with computers, and it's doing a lot of really intensive work, and that it's highly lucrative, and you don't have to spend 4 years in a university or other even longer to get that kind of job is something that we should really emphasize to young people, and to raise the, Mike Rowe has done a lot of work kind of raising the cultural consciousness of manufacturing jobs and dirty, unquote, quote unquote, dirty jobs. So I think it's probably a cultural issue.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, a couple of things there. First of all, it's getting involved with your schools. As I mentioned, you know, I'm involved with both of our VOTECs, and I guess one of the fortunate things for me is I get to share my story. You know, when I was done with high school, I graduated with honors. I did okay in school. I had no problems. I was tired of the formal classroom, and I went in the military, and I became an electrician there, and that set me up the rest of my life. And I can tell you, you know, I get to stand up in front of these kids, and I've gone to graduations as a national president and done commencement speeches all over the country this year. And it's pretty awesome to see how proud they are to be graduating from a program like this. And what's really kind of neat for them to see me is I started in those same seats, right? Look where I am today. I'm standing here sitting here on this panel in front of Congress and giving this testimony. Anything is possible if you get involved. And they need to know that you don't have to go to that 4-year college to do something great. It's a matter of being involved and paying attention and doing your best and all those things. And, you know, those programs that Mr. Clark talked about, you know, things like that matter. Getting involved with the high schools matters. And the other side of it, as Mr. Castro talked about, is getting rid of some of the regulatory stuff. I can tell you in Pennsylvania, you know, just locally, we're hamstrung by the ratios. You know, we have to have 3 journeymen for 1 apprentice on a job site. That's 3 supervisors for 1 guy. Well, let's face it. The bottom line is when you have 3 people in charge, nobody's in charge, right? When everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. So, you know, get rid of some of those regulatory things that are making us hamstrung. Think about it. If it was a 1-to-1 ratio, or in Colorado, it's the other way. It's 3-to-1. 1 supervisor, 3 apprentices. Mm-hmm. Holy cow, we could put a whole bunch more people to work, couldn't we?
Right. Very good. My time has expired. I'll now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Evans, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carrick, are you familiar with a book called Other Ways to Win?
I'm not.
Okay. It's written by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Gray in Pennsylvania. And he talked about, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what the chairman raised on this larger issue. And when he talked about other ways to win, he talked about, you know, we have sort of like a traditional thinking, the way we approach. And I'm a strong advocate in the area of manufacturing because in Pennsylvania, as you know, tool and die makers, and we're at that critical age of transition in population and making how we make that particular transition. So you point out an example, and I am familiar with Lehigh Valley and what has taken place there. The Delaware Valley Industrial Resource Center, is that a model that you could think that could be used?
I do. I think they've done a lot of good work. The Pennsylvania MEP programs,
Right.
including the Manufacturers Resource Center in Lehigh Valley and DVIRC in the Philadelphia region, and both do a very good job.
Right, right, right. But do you see, because what I see is sometime taking examples and building on those type of examples. So can you speak to a little bit about the examples? Because we're talking about looking at it from a national perspective.
Sure.
And obviously the culture is different, state by state, location by location. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So unfortunately, the examples that I gave are the exception, not the norm.
Right.
There are not enough of these across the country. And that includes the apprenticeship approach, whether it is a formal registered apprenticeship or a more informal system, or the ability to aggregate that demand in a region for small manufacturers so that instead of needing 2 jobs, the 10 companies combined need 20 or 25, and that gets a lot more attention. So groups like DVIRC and Manufacturers Resource Center are there to actually play that sort of coordinator or hub role where they can speak for and aggregate the voice of manufacturers in a region. So it would be, unfortunately, there are too few organizations like that across the country that are able to successfully aggregate those voices or help to navigate the education system. And frankly, the manufacturers sometimes are unwilling or unable to navigate the educational bureaucracy to successfully set up apprenticeship programs. So groups like DVIRC are important for that.
But my understanding in Japan and in Germany, they used teaching factories. Is that, you familiar with that?
I am.
Okay.
Unfortunately, those systems are different from the bottom up.
Right.
So Chairman Bratt mentioned waving a magic wand, right? So you would have to really change everything from the bottom up to recreate a German or a Japanese style program. I think there's an opportunity for us to take what is great about America in terms of individual choice and the ability to pursue your dreams, but still set up the right systems such that individuals can actually achieve a skill set that enables them to live those dreams.
But would you not agree if we're going to, the president talks about economic growth in the ballpark of 3-4%, and, obviously we haven't been able to get there.
Yes.
So if we're going to get there, we're at a point where we do have to do something radical. Would you not agree?
I do.
Okay. So that's kind of why, I talk about Germany, I talk about Japan and what they have done. I mean, clearly some rethinking, redesigning in our thinking, because if we don't, we can kind of, hodgepodge, or we can kind of go for the gusto is the issue I'm really trying to push you and raise with you.
I would love to go for the gusto in terms of the intersection or the integration of companies with the education system, but we need to properly incentivize the companies to do so. And how that happens is up to you all, but companies take on a great deal of risk when they're training individuals, oftentimes only to see those individuals leave for other jobs. So,
But that sort of fits back to what Dr. Farrow talked about, is using the tax code as an example to make that structure change. I assume that's what you're referring to, right?
Yes, Ranking Member Evans, that's exactly what I was referring to, allowing companies to do their own training and treating training as if it were investments in factory machines.
Right. I mean, if we're going to change and using the tax code, what I'm understanding using the tax code, I talked about Germany and Japan, but if you're going to make that kind of change, you're going to have to do something if you're going to get to the growth numbers that we talk about as a country. Right.
yes, sir.
I thank you, and you're back to balancing my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Mississippi, my friend, good friend, Mr. Trent Kelly.
And hopefully we won't need an interpreter for these guys, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our ranking member. It's a very important issue to me, and I come from an area that is booming right now, but we still got a long way to go as far as creating workforce, and Itawamba Community College is a huge part of that, as are Northeast and Northwest community colleges in different areas of my district. But we have a great community college system in Mississippi, which I'm a product of. And a graduate from the educational side, but there's 2 sides to it, and both of them are very, very valuable. I grew up in a world where I often heard, I'm the first member of my family to graduate from college. I grew up in a world where men were ashamed not to have calluses on their hands, to a world now where men are ashamed to have calluses on their hand. That shows that they have to work hard for a living. But in the world that I grew up in, men were embarrassed not to have calluses on their hand. I mean, they might. And so it's a traditional shift in what we think is important. And it should always be about a ways to an end. Whether you get a college degree or a trade and skill or an apprenticeship, it should be about what do I want to do, and it should be about earning power. And we've lost that and turned that where people just think they need a college education, and that college or trade are now just the end. It's like, if I get a college education, I'm successful. No, you're not. That is a ways to an end. And so how do we shift that? And I want each of you to shift that where we as Americans now put the earning power and the skills that that person brings to the table, and we put that on a higher plane than we have a college education where everyone thinks they need one and deserve one today. And we'll start with Mr. Carrick and come back the other way, since we've left out other folks going the other way.
Sure. I think that is that's based on 50 years ago thinking, which was that there was only a very small single-digit percentage of the population that earned a college degree. So that really was the ticket to a good job and steady wages and a successful life. These days, there are many different pathways, and it does not specifically include a bachelor's degree. It includes an associate degree. It includes industry-based credentials. It includes an apprenticeship. So understanding that the educational credential or the path does not there's no single educational path that leads to success is the best way, I believe, to ensure respect for all educational pathways that can lead to good jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We have a young man that came to us 7 years ago through a program where I was reimbursed for the wages that I paid this young man, that came along with another 3 workers that I acquired at that time through that program. He's the only one that stayed. Immediately we noticed his desire to succeed and his ability to think and to thrive. So we pay a lot of attention to him like we do with anybody else. But I'm happy to tell you that he's making over $100,000 in our company. He doesn't have not even half of an associate degree. And I parade him, not just him, but the rest of the people that work with me that are in management, that I brought them from the ground up, because we are in an industry that people doesn't look up to when they're looking for a career or a job. You know, people my age, they will say, oh, I used to buy groceries here and there. You don't hear that anymore on younger people. You know, we have made it so easy. But my point when I go to talk to whether they are, you know, elementary school students or high school students or grown up, you know, it is all about your attitude and hard work that will get you wherever you are. And of course, you know, not to toot my own horn, I just tell them this is what we have achieved as a family, and you can do so too. So we need to change that, and it's been said here, you know, all along. We need to change the culture. It's hard work that gets you wherever you want to succeed.
I agree, and that's my whole point, Chairman, is my dad had a high school education. He was plant manager and very regional in the furniture industry because he learned how to work every machine in that factory, and he got the best at his job, and he was a visionary, and he understood the engineering parts of it. He had an engineering mind better than some of the other people who had engineering degrees, even masters and further degrees. We need to get back where it's not what kind of education, it's where you want to go and what best gets me that. And it's being a visionary and a leader and being the best at your job, whatever that trade or skill is, whether it's a college education or welding. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from Florida and my good friend Stephanie Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. You know, when I go out in my district and I talk to the employers, in a wide cross-section of businesses, whether it's construction, manufacturing, tech, healthcare, even call centers. The number one challenge that they tell me they have is recruitment and retention of qualified employees. And so I'm particularly grateful for your perspectives. I find it interesting that I'm hearing that from employers in my district, because I have a district that has probably one of the most diverse and robust post-secondary education systems. We have the nation's largest university, the University of Central Florida, with over 65,000 students. We have a couple of community college institutions, Seminole State and Valencia College. And we have a great liberal arts, Rollins College. And then a handful of career and technical education and private institutions. So a really diverse and robust education system. And yet still, when it comes to our labor force in the area, the number one issue is recruitment and retention of qualified workers. So in Dr. Farron's testimony, you identified the two possible causes of this skills gap that could be related to our education system. And the first is the idea that the schools might not be teaching students the exact skills necessary for the work that the employers need. And the second is the guessing game that students have to play when choosing to invest in higher education, because they're unable to forecast what skills that will be needed by their employers in the future. And in a 2012 McKinsey report, it found that 72% of higher education institutions believe that graduates are fully prepared for the workforce, while only 42% of the employers agree. So that seems to indicate that there's a communications gap between higher education institutions and the industries for which the schools are ostensibly preparing the students. I'm working on a piece of legislation now to implement what's an employer needs survey, in which we would collect voluntary feedback from employers across industries on workforce needs. And then this publicly available feedback would be provided to colleges and universities so that they can make adjustments to their curricula to ensure that the graduating students that are ready to join the workforce on day one. Could you all provide your thoughts on whether you think such a feedback loop would be valuable in closing that skills gap? And then do you think that higher education institutions would be willing to incorporate that kind of feedback into their curricula? And then more generally, have you all had any experience working with institutions of higher education to help convey skills needs suggestions? Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. So yes, your idea dovetails very closely with my idea that we need to address the costs of acquiring new training. And I think that the survey that you propose could be very valuable, but perhaps going back to my initial suggestion of simply allowing employers to take a tax deduction for training, wouldn't have to be in-house training. It might be outsourced training. Essentially what you would be doing is creating markets for training new workers in the same way that has kind of already been discussed here, but more official markets for it. And what that would do is create a price signal for the local secondary institutions to say, oh, we really need to respond to this new demand because there's profit in it for us to respond to that demand, rather than them saying, okay, well, we think that our employers in our district need more math and science or welding or what have you, and trying to create programs for that, which is kind of a roundabout way of solving the skills gap, rather than the direct way of say what you need and then go out and purchase what you need.
Great, thank you. Any of the other witnesses have comments on that?
Sure, I'll comment about that a little bit. You know, one of the things you asked about is, you know, you mentioned that the universities and so on, and then the career fields they go into, do they have the skills that they need? And you know, what was that? 42% said no. Well, I can give you a personal experience on that. My son, who, sorry to say, graduated from Penn State. Actually, I'm not sorry to say, but but he graduated with an electrical engineering degree. At the same time he was going to school, he worked for our company for 9.5 years in the electrical field. And so he's now got a great opportunity. He's moved down to Nashville. He's working with a $30 billion global company, but he's in a group with 24 new engineers. And I've asked him, I said, so, you know, in the time that you're down there and you're going through this 3-month training program with these new engineers, I said, how many times did you reference the work that you did in college? 0. I said, how many times did you reference the work that you've done in the field for the last 9.5 years? He said, daily. So there's a huge gap in what they think they need and what they really do need. And that's one of the great things about going to the VOTEC programs is some of these folks that are already in the electrical program or the mechanics program, whatever they're doing, and getting in there and getting them, you know, we had a young man that co-opted with us. So while he's going to his senior year in high school last year, half a day he's coming to our shop and working in our prefabrication shop. He's getting experience with tools, terminology, the understanding of how things go together. There's, you know, so we're doing our best. I mean, we're a small company, and kind of like Mr. Carrick said, you know, geez, it'd be nice if everybody was doing this. And you know, then if you want to talk a little bit about where could the help be, well, we're a small company. We're footing the bill for this, and we pay for all of our apprentice classes and everything they go to and their books. Holy cow, it'd be nice to have a little help to do that for sure. I mean, fortunately, our company owner is huge on education, and he believes in growing people, and so there's a lot to be said for that.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing your personal story, and I'm out of time, so I'll yield back.
I think we can run an informal shop if you wanted. Did you have any?
Just if anybody else had any other comments, but other than that, yeah.
Sure, Mr. Kesra.
I had a comment. I was majoring in industrial engineering when I had to leave El Salvador due to a civil war. So I found myself here in D.C., actually in Georgetown, doing dishes and toilet cleaning and all that kind of stuff. That it was fun, you know, make a buck. But after I learned English and was able to enter Northern Virginia Community College, which I proudly serve on the foundation board nowadays, I didn't know what to do. So I took some classes. One of the classes was called Career Awareness. If I remember well, it was like a century ago. But at the end of the class, I was so pleased that, you know, anything that I thought it was completely wrong, the teacher told me, you have a background in construction, you have a background in engineering. Construction is good here in the Washington area. I think that your easiest way to progress is construction. And I did follow their advice, and I worked in construction for about 15 years, made my money there, and then we went into the supermarket business. So I thought that, and ever since, I always, you know, trying to do whatever I can to help Northern Virginia Community College because they played a big role on finding my direction. So maybe we can do the same for other young or adult people to help them find the right direction on time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Congresswoman, I think we've thought about what you're describing, and we think of it as a signaling problem. Essentially, the way the market's set up is that employers indicate the skill set that they need through what amount to one ads, right? So I need a welder. Well, you need to unpack what it is that you need in that welder in order to actually tell the education system what skill set to train. So, and then you need to aggregate those signals within a given regional economy so that it isn't just one company or two companies, but it's 40 or 50 or 100 companies that whose skill requirements and job demands are aggregated such that they can then properly signal both the high schools and the community colleges and the universities and other private training providers that collectively we have a demand for 200 welders, 50% of whom require this skill set, 40% of whom require this skill set. So I would say there is a need for better clarity in signaling. How we actually get there, I think, is the big question. So I'm happy to discuss further as your bill proceeds.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Dwight. I want to thank our witnesses for your participation today. Up here, it's kind of you got to make some noise. And so I think it is valuable to schedule these hearings to remind us of the most important issues and just keep it on our radar. And so don't go away and be quiet. Keep making noise, spreading the new culture that we got to get to the kids. That is the mystery, right? I mean, there's a $50,000 signal being sent out in economics land, right? And young people aren't hearing that one, right? And I'll just close on a joke. What I taught the kids, I'd always say, what are your plans there, you know, Ms. Johnson or Mr. Smith, whoever? What are you going to do when you're done with college? Well, I'm going to go ski in Colorado for a year or something. And I'm like, okay, right? I mean, I get done lecturing on the debt and all these issues we come in, and they're going to go off. So there is a signal, right? The $50,000 signal is not hitting this generation for some reason. So I applaud you for all the good ideas you all gave us. Very good ideas and input. Mr. Seaham, quick question.
If I could speak to that real quick, I had the fortunate ability a couple of years ago. I listened to Bill Bennett, who wrote the Book
Yeah.
of Virtues, and I got to listen to him at Messiah College in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the comments he made, you talk about going back to fundamentals,
Right.
and I share this at my commencement speeches that I've done this year. But one of the issues is he says, you know, a lot of people are saying, geez, we need better kids. And the truth and the fact is, no, we need better parents is what we need. So that's as fundamental as it gets.
Yep, that might be the signal strengthener that we need to put forward. So on that note, I mean, help spread the word, keep us all working together as a team. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned, and thank you all very much. And thank you to the staff who always makes this possible.